Okay, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Office of the Dean of Students of Equity and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, our Women's History Month program featuring our recent alum, Miss Nikki Lopez. She will be sharing her analysis, her insights, her research on diversity and inclusion in the beauty industry. We're so proud of her. She's a Leesburg, Virginia native and economics major. So this is a smart woman, and we're so happy and excited for her to share her talents with us and her knowledge. So thank you, Nikki. Please take it from here.
Thank you so much. And I'm so excited to be here. Honestly, I was talking about how nervous I was to get on here, but we're just gonna act like we're in a really long FaceTime, and I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen because I have a really nice presentation that I put together for everybody. Let me escape. So part of my presentation, there's going to be, of course, an intro, and then also I'm going to go into more discussion-based questions. I hope to either provide perspective or ignite some conversation or give some people time to reflect on things that usually people think are normal, but in reality, it's really not. So diversity inclusion in the beauty industry. I have an Instagram account called The Holy Gospel. And basically what I do a variety of things, and I'll go more into detail about what I do on my profile separately. But just as an agenda so we can be on the same page, I'll go into my intro, and then after I'll talk about my Shady series, and then I'll go into how I do it and how I create my visuals, what goes into the process, how I was inspired to create Shady series. And then I've also provided some comparisons of shade analyses that I've already created and you can see on my profile. But I wanted to include some notable ones that ignited really interesting conversations on Instagram. And then discussions. So I have 3 questions that are still circulating in the community and trying to find the right answer to them, which I wanted to share that message with you guys and share those questions so you can also find the answer on your own. And then Q&A, if you guys have any questions about what you've seen, about me, about my profile, please feel free to ask. I'll try and be as detailed as I can with my answers, but at the end of the day, I don't want to speak for these brands because all I do is analyze their shade ranges. So before I started the Holy Gospel, I've changed my username quite a lot, I would say. First, I was Varsity Skin, and then second, I was actually the Snoop Dogg fan page. And when I was the Snoop Dogg fan page, a lot of people were questioning, like, what is the point of that username? It's so hard to find you. Nobody can really tell what you do. And to me, that was the whole point of my profile because I started out doing your typical beauty photography of static photos and, kissing butt to all of these brands, trying to get onto all of these PR lists and be one of those influencers in the community that was all sunshine, all positive, everything is good in her life. That's all I wanted. And I really used that as my creative and therapeutic outlet because at the time, on May 2018, I talk about this on my profile a lot, but I was in a bad place mentally. And so being able to diffuse all of that stress and tension within me, I created my account, which is why I wanted to reflect such positivity on my profile because things weren't going so well in my personal. Fast forward, my content has now varied to being static photos of beauty and skincare products, but also looking into consumer behavior and looking at the beauty brands and the beauty industry in particular. As mentioned, I did graduate as an economics student. So the more I studied and the more I researched, the more I realized how consumer behavior is a really important thing to consider when you're looking at the beauty industry as a whole, because ethics come into it, business ethics. And a huge part of my account from the beginning of Varsity Skin to now, the Holy Gospel, a big part of it is trying to identify those brands that are worthy of being promoted and praised, and some of those brands that probably need a knock in the head. And definitely there's a lot of, I guess I would say, baggage that comes with that responsibility of being able to speak out against those brands and being able to analyze these shade ranges, because it's a difficult topic and a difficult conversation for people to participate in, merely because it's something you're either unfamiliar with, you're not comfortable with, or you just simply don't know. And so being able to bring that conversation to the platform in the community that I was in just felt like something that was right. So in addition to being a lifestyle and personal brand, talking about my mental health, talking about my personal experience with acne and products, I also talk about the beauty industry and do my Shady series. So how I do it, this is a screen recording of me analyzing Ilia Beauty. If you don't know Ilia Beauty is a very popular brand in the space. They actually released a skin tint with an expansion of shades recently after my analysis. So I had analyzed them the first time, and I received a message from Ilia Beauty, who then said, "This is not right. This is incorrect. You did it wrong. Let's give you the proper shade swatches that you can analyze, because the ones on our website aren't doing us justice." So I was like, fine. So this is me analyzing the proper shade swatch that they had given me. Basically what I do is I go into Adobe Photoshop, very easy, and I turn it into, it's a CIE lab color code. I go into the lab color model and I extract the lightness from each shade. I then plot those shades into a spectrum from 0 to 100, where 0 to 10 would be the darkest end of the spectrum, and then 90 to 100 would be the lightest end of the spectrum. And you'll be able to see what I'm talking about when I go into the next slide. But essentially here, I'm extracting the lightness values, and where it says lightness, that number, I'm taking that, plotting it onto the graph, so then I can create a visual experience for the users on Instagram. The reason why I started Shady Series was because I was inspired by the pudding. So all cred, all kudos, bow down to the mighty Amber Thomas. She was the one that actually discovered a way to use the CIE lab color model to extract lightness values. And you can see here screenshots from the article itself. They were talking about Fenty Beauty, and when Fenty Beauty released their extensive shade range, a lot of these brands felt the need to pull up and felt the need to show that they were the ones that started it first. So Makeup Forever actually clapped back to Fenty Beauty and said that, hey, we actually started it first with the amount of shades, and we're actually more inclusive than you probably think. And so to test that statement, the pudding then created this article to analyze Fenty Beauty and Makeup Forever. They then used the CIE lab color models, same way that I do, and then they analyzed popular shade ranges, so from L'Oreal, Revlon, MAC, NARS, you name it. Knowing how they did this, and being an economics student myself who was obsessed with academic research, because at the time when I was starting Shady Series, it was June of 2020, I believe. June 2020, I had put out my first post of the Shady Series, and I was actually in the process of finding out what my topic was for my thesis, my honors thesis. And so when I went through that article, I was fascinated about the amount of things I could do with this information. You could analyze future launches, you could analyze current products that weren't mentioned in the article before. And so knowing this, I was like, heck, let's go ahead and use it for our Instagram. So my first ever post, I actually analyzed 7 popular foundation ranges. And like I mentioned before, because it's a difficult conversation that a lot of people aren't used to encountering or being involved in the community, because again, the community is so positive, right? And they view this as a difficult and challenging conversation that interrupts the flow of the community, when in fact, it's all just facts. So when I was able to put out that first post, a lot of people were really interested on what other brands had because of the pull up or shut up movement on Instagram. I'm not sure if you remember this, but a lot of people were asking these brands to pull up with their stats and show, if you really believe in diversity, if you really believe in inclusivity, then give us the data. So reflecting that same model, I know that people believe in facts. So I was like, you know what? Let's put the facts together and present to these people that some of these foundation ranges, some of these favorite and popular ones, aren't as inclusive as a lot of people tend to believe. So going through comparisons, this is basically how I do my shady series. I put the amount of analysis that have already gone past. So we have Gucci, ColourPop, and L'Oreal, 3 very popular foundations. As you can see between the 3, Gucci probably has the most balanced distribution. They have, I believe, 6 shades available in the 10 to 20 lightness range. 10 to 20 being part of the darkest end of the spectrum, and then 80 to 90, which is where most people's max is, being the lightest end. So a lot of people were surprised that Gucci was able to do this and that Gucci put this out because of some controversies that Gucci had been involved in from the past. Second is ColourPop. ColourPop is also a very popular one, and a lot of people were surprised to know that the lightness range, the shades were available at 30 to 40. So compare that to then Gucci, who has 8 shades available before ColourPop then begins their shade range. And then you can use that same concept for L'Oreal as well. L'Oreal, interestingly enough, is a very popular foundation, drugstore foundation. I'm currently in the process of doing an analysis. I'm doing 17 analyses on Birdie's 17 popular foundations. I'm sure most people probably have heard of Birdie. A lot of people regard them as a reliable source. They compiled a list of the 17 best foundations for 2021. Part of the review process and their methodology that I read, they do take into account of distribution of shade ranges and the brands and their ethics before they rate them. And I was surprised to see that L'Oreal was actually included in that top 17 list, considering it starts at 40 to 50 and it's only 1 shade. And so you can see that comparison to the other 2. What does that say about Birdie? I don't know. What does that say about L'Oreal? I don't know. That is something for other people to then interpret. A huge thing I should also mention with my account is I don't like to provoke negative discussion in the comments. Now, granted, there are brands out there that probably do deserve it, but I try to keep it as impartial as I can, because at the end of the day, these are facts, and I don't want to put out personal bias and then skew other people's perspective and not have them figure it out on their own. Another popular debate in the shade range world is skin tints. So skin tints, actually compared to foundations, they don't, they're more light to medium coverage, whereas foundations could be from medium to heavy coverage. And so with the skin tint, you actually have more leniency in terms of the amount of shades you could produce in your line, because some shades are able to fit plethora of people in a plethora of skin tones because of how less opaque it is to foundation. So with these 3 popular skin tints, we have Glossier, Ilia Beauty, and Milk Makeup. 3, again, very popular ones. And 3 brands during the pull up or shut up movement who actually pulled up, or at least tried to. But in this community, these are the 3 most popular ones that I see amongst my followers in my timeline. So when I analyzed Glossier, I was also keeping in mind that a lot of people worshipped Glossier and they loved Glossier. And so when I put out Glossier's analysis, a lot of people didn't agree with me. But again, these are the facts. And so when I produced the Glossier post, you could see that they do have shades available in the 10 to 20 range compared to Ilia Beauty and Milk Makeup, who lack a shade in that range. Ilia Beauty does provide more shades, and a lot of people, since the launch of Fenty Beauty, assume that more shades equals more inclusive. But as you can see, Ilia Beauty's, it's actually skewed. So they provide more shades to the lighter skin tones. A huge question that I do get a lot, and I got one last night or yesterday from someone who works for Johnson & Johnson, and he had asked me, he was like, do you know the frequency? Or do you know the actual visualization of the amount of skin tones and the amount of undertones that are available in the world? Because that would be a useful tool to compare to a shade range. I told him I do not. That is a question that I'm currently looking for myself, but that is something that would definitely benefit my research and definitely benefit in situations like this, when we have to figure out, okay, as you can see amongst all 3 of these, most of them do cater to the lighter skin tone range. It doesn't matter who it is, and it doesn't matter how inclusive they claim to be. Most of them do, and there's probably a reason for that. So there's another perspective to look at when you're looking at shade ranges. And then third, here are ones that definitely got a lot of people upset because they're 3 popular ones. There's Monica Blunder. Monica Blunder actually is a famous makeup artist. She has worked on a lot of celebrities. You could see on her blog, on her page, her website, she has her whole portfolio up there. And when I was going through her portfolio, I noticed, now this could be a reach, don't quote me on this, but as a researcher, of course, I just have to observe and draw claims and try to prove those claims or try to look more into them. So when I was looking at Monica Blunder's portfolio, I saw that all of her clients that she had put in her portfolio are actually lighter skin tones. She does have POC on there, but they're lighter skin tones. And so when I had analyzed her shade range and I saw what was before me, as you can see above here, it was disappointing to say the least, because you have to take into account the shade range, but you also have to take into account who they are, what their work is, how they run their brand. And that's where the business ethics come into the Shady series and how the 2 and 2 meet together. So Monica Blunder was actually one that ignited a lot of conversation on Instagram. And then Huda Beauty as well. Huda Beauty, obviously, they definitely cater to one specific lightness range. And a lot of people think that this is the norm, but if we saw Gucci's previously, it's able to be done. And then finally, Revlon, which is another popular drugstore one, and it definitely starts farther than what Gucci would have started. So it starts at the 30 to 40. So after I extract the lightness, I then list the shades and put them into the proper ranges. So then I would create a graph from there and post it onto Instagram. So to further the conversation, now the discussion of shade ranges and the discussion of inclusivity in the beauty industry is one that is always ongoing, because there's so many perspectives to consider and there's so many experiences that a lot of people don't experience. They're very personal experiences, and they're experiences that shouldn't be not recognized. So one question that is constantly being asked, especially to me, is what does a good foundation range look like? You know, I'm posting all of these foundation ranges and not one is really catching anybody's eye except for the one that was from Gucci. And to be honest with you, I'm not an expert in the field. I'm really not. And the only reason why I started, or one of the biggest reasons why I started Shady series, was to learn more about how shade ranges were divided in a product line. So what does a good foundation range look like? I would assume a good foundation range would look balanced. I would assume it would look somewhat similar to Gucci, where possibly it is able to cater to both ends of the spectrum in a somewhat equal way. Other than that, the only real way to answer that question is if we're able to get a frequency of the amount of undertones and skin tones in the world, which again, something that we are going to look forward to. But that is one that a lot of people ask. And then the second one is, how about funding? And it's interesting, it's an interesting question, because a lot of indie brands, especially Monica Blunder likes to use this statement where she says she's a small brand, so she can't afford to have a long shade range like Fenty. Fair. But one thing to keep in mind is that the reason why it's more expensive to produce these darker shades is because the amount of pigment that really needs to go into the product development. It's a lot more pigment than compared to ones that would cater to lighter skin tones. And so a lot of people tend to skimp on that side of the spectrum because either it's too expensive or they don't think it's going to pay for itself. But newsflash, it pays for itself. Why? Because people need it, period. And again, there are a lot of factors to consider. Someone's shade range and how it's distributed is not one factor to determine if they are inclusive or not, but it's definitely something to heavily put in the back of your mind, because it does tell a lot about a brand. And it did reflect a lot about Monica Blunder when she was using that excuse, because a lot of people said, look, it pays for itself. So I don't know what the other excuse is. A lot of other brands also like to say, oh my goodness, it took like 5 years for me to produce this. You know, I just had to get it out there. You could have waited 5 more. I mean, it's not like anyone was dying of thirst to get that product out on the market. The biggest thing with the community that a lot of people are having a hard time grasping, especially consumers, and one thing that I myself am also trying to figure out is, don't release something unless you know it can cater to a lot of people, almost all people. Because as you know, from an economics perspective, wouldn't you want something that appeals to a lot more customers, therefore increasing your own profit, paying for your own expenses? So thinking about the funding and the other factors that go into a shade range is another thing that could direct the conversation another way. And then finally, will there ever be change? I know that we're living in 2021. We had Pull Up or Shut Up. We had so many other people and influencers and notable speakers who are talking about the need for inclusivity and diversity in the beauty industry. But will there ever be change? I wouldn't know. I don't know. I can't speak for a brand and I can't speak for the community, and I certainly can't answer whether or not there's been change, because my experience with beauty is completely different from someone else's. So for me to say that something has been remediated, that could be completely different to someone else who still sees an issue. So it's definitely something that's ongoing and a conversation that I don't think is ending anytime soon, which is why Shady Series is something that I'm proud of producing and proud of creating, despite the amount of backlash I may get, or despite the amount of brands that block me or tell me that I'm wrong. It's all coming from fact. And the best that I can do is to help people and provide perspective and give knowledge as to things that, you know, are usually normalized, but they shouldn't be. And there definitely should be more of an equal playing field in the beauty industry, because a lot of people, not a lot of people, but all people in any case, should feel the same way, should feel beautiful in their own way, without having to skimp out on trying out a product because they couldn't find their shade. Things like that, experiences like that mean a lot. And so finally, you can contact me, you can email me. I do check my email. I try to check my email as much as I can. But this is a real-time screenshot of what my feed looks like right now. So you can see it's just a mix of everything. And in addition to doing my shade analysis, I do investigations, I like to say, into certain brands with certain issues. And you can see all of that on Instagram. And I definitely won't change my username anytime soon, so you won't have to think that I'll change it. But my website is on there as well. But in any case, I really hope my discussion provides perspective in the beauty industry and helps ignite productive conversation. And hopefully we can move forward to change and be able to see a difference in the beauty industry from what used to be normal. I'm done.
That was awesome, Nikki.
Thanks,
You
thanks.
should have some questions. You can take your mics off of mute. You can clap.
Thank you. I'll clap for myself.
That's right.
Good job. Woo-hoo.
Thanks, guys. Thanks.
It was great.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm
That's
so
the
glad.
power, Nikki. That's awesome.
Thanks. Anybody have any questions, any pressing questions, or?
I have a question
Yes, ma'am.
about your methodology.
Yes, ma'am.
So you're using photos to analyze the pigmentation? Have you ever considered teaming up with like a chemist to do a real person spectrometry analysis to really get the, I would be worried that using the photo, you don't get the actual correct data.
Oh, for sure.
You get an approximation of it, but have you considered working with a chemist to firm up your data?
Yes, ma'am. That's a great input. So again, it definitely is not accurate. They're web-based colors, so it's a rough proxy of what really is true. But I do have a call scheduled with one of the founders for When Life Gives You Lemons, and she created a foundation line, and they're launching in June. And I wanted to discuss with her process and what really goes into the production and talk to who her contact is, because there's definitely perspectives out there that would definitely benefit the conversation and benefit my content more as well and add more credibility to it. Because at the end of the day, you know, I am just a kid on social media who's producing something that is just screenshotted. And so being able to have those relationships and discussions with people in the field definitely is something that I would look into and strongly consider.
All right. And I would say that you're not just a kid on social media.
Yeah, people are like, oh, you're small, but you're mighty. But it's like, I know, but a lot of times I get intimidated with, I guess, these brands, because it definitely is me versus them, a large corporation. So again, that type of information would also be helpful because it would add credibility.
Nikki,
Yes.
don't sell yourself short. Again, my husband and I are eating dinner, watching and listening. And when you said, I'm not an expert, he said, yes, she is. That's why she's giving us a talk. So don't sell yourself short.
Thanks. Any other questions for me?
I totally agree with that, Nikki. Actually, so a friend of mine sent this over to me probably maybe about 3 hours ago, that you're doing this because she knows I'm a makeup artist, but I'm also interested in these types of topics. And so when she sent it to me, because they work at the university, I decided to hop on. And I'm actually really impressed with the fact that you took initiative from, I don't know, I wasn't here from the beginning, so I don't know what inspired you to get into it. But it is a very, very critical and important topic in the beauty industry, really reshaping the way it's been defined over time and understanding what exists, what doesn't exist, and what to recommend to people. And so to me, this is the most interesting part of my journey as an artist, more so than doing the faces, was finding out the myths, what people believe, what people think, what's out there, and how to redefine the way we have seen things for years. So I can understand if you're saying that you've experienced some pushback, because it's revolutionary. So that should give you more encouragement to go forward. Many of the things we're even seeing now in terms of diversity with ranges have been in the last few years. It hasn't even been there for a long enough time. And so I'm proud of that. My question to you would be, what was the most surprising thing that you found out on your journey that you actually didn't know about from the beginning?
A really great question. I think one of the biggest things that I learned was definitely how much thought and how much difficulty people really encounter when trying to shade match. Because when there was one time when Tarte had launched one of their foundation ranges, and it was a picture of an arm, and you can see it was all white, 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 and then there's like one that could cater to darker skin tones. And when I had seen that, I was like, oh, I mean, for sure, people are going to have a hard time to shade match, for sure. But then there's a lot of those that you would see just from looking at it. It looks like it would cater to a lot more people. But the more that I analyzed these shade range, the less I was expecting something revolutionary. And it was sad to know that. It was sad to realize that in 2021. Because I understand funding, I understand there's a lot of factors that go into it, there is. But there's some brands out there that they just can't hit the point, and they don't understand why, or they do and they have an excuse for it. And having to have that conversation, an individual, a consumer versus a brand, is very difficult, because it's me, and then you have like a group of people, an institution. And so one of the biggest things I learned was, it looks normal, and this is something that is normal for a lot of people, but it's not normal. And I had to learn how to identify that and learn how to speak up about it, because a lot of people don't, or a lot of people do, but they don't realize what really goes into it or goes behind the scenes. But thank you so much for your kind words. And I definitely agree with you that, only in the past few years has it gotten better, but still hasn't. So it's definitely a learning curve that we're all trying to experience at the same time.
Yeah, the journey is definitely long. And even as an artist, shade matching is a challenge. I find myself using 1 to 2 or 3 colors on a client because there's no one single color that works. And so we're still at the point where we're mixing foundations, we're matching it. But I am very much aware of this. I apply it to my day-to-day. I choose brands and I seek out brands that cater to different skin tones, different skin types, oily versus matte versus what's out there. And really, I also give smaller brands a chance as well. If I see a smaller brand that's trying to come up, give it a chance as well. So hopefully at some point, we can collaborate about just great things out there that are going on, because this is a topic, and sometimes people downplay the importance of the beauty industry because it's beauty and it seems superficial, but there is so much there that guides or influences women and young girls. And so I surely do believe that the more the industry makes sense, the better for the younger girls coming up in the Instagram age.
Agreed, 100% agree. And, to the point of it being a conversation that's still ongoing, I'm excited to see what happens in the future, and I'm excited to hear what other people think, because you still to this day have people that don't know why it's such an important topic, or don't know why why do you have to bring this type of conversation into a beauty space where it's supposed to be fun and positive and things like that. And I've had my share of people call me a bully, and I've had my share of people tell me that what I'm doing is wrong. But the only way that change can happen is if you bring something that's unfamiliar to a space and show them why it's something that's more appropriate than what they're used to.
Nikki, I have a question. My name is Marnell Niles Goins. I'm the interim dean for the College of Sciences and Humanities. Well, actually, first, I just want to applaud you for just the tremendous work that you're doing. I just want to know, have you thought about what this looks like outside of the makeup industry? And so, for example, even as I raise my hand in Zoom, right, it's yellow, right? And so I need to download the app and then find a skin tone that's my complexion, or looking for a Band-Aid that's nude, or shoes that are nude. Even the term nude it's problematic. And so as you're thinking about how it applies, potentially how it definitely applies outside the makeup industry, but as you potentially try to apply your research outside the makeup industry, can you explain what that looks like? And then part two is, for me and for many people of color, we realize that these various industries can definitely make change, and make changes very quickly. And I think we've realized that over the past year. So if you think about Band-Aid, for example, the brand itself, they came out with a line of Band-Aids for people of a darker complexion, what seemed like in about a month. And it's because all of these other Band-Aid industries, these small businesses have produced it. And so they definitely have that capability. But I think once they're realizing the power of, for example, the Black dollar or the power of the dollar of people of color, now they're kind of coming to realize that, oh, we spend a lot of money on things that are specific to our skin complexion. So I'm interested in if you would consider looking at other industries beyond the makeup industry. I think I have maybe 7 to 10 different brands of foundation right now that kind of work in some sense, depending on the season, and some are a little too, yellow or red. And so I'm really proud of what you're doing, but I'm also interested in if you think about doing it in other arenas that are much needed. Start with Zoom and my yellow hand.
Well, no, for sure. And see, like things like that, other people would probably not even realize that, but that's a huge deal because it talks a lot and says a lot about other things, right? And so going outside of the beauty industry, actually, I had a question like this last night. They had asked if I was going to analyze like Spanx, or Christian Louboutin actually released his nude line of shoes, right? And it's definitely something I think would be beneficial, and something that, even though it's not related to the beauty industry, it's still very related because it's something that's a part of someone, and it definitely determines on how they feel on the outside because it's something that's part of their appearance. So to answer your question, yes, 100%, that is definitely something I will do and consider. The only reason why I haven't gotten to it is because I'm so stuck in the beauty verse, right? But as time goes on, and hopefully, I really hope, even though I'm already out of school, probably I'll write a paper or somewhat, and definitely talk about that more, because a lot of people don't understand, like with Band-Aid, right? A lot of people didn't really understand the problem with it until like in today's verse. And that's concerning because it's something that was so normal, but it's something that a lot of people struggled with. And again, with the experiences, everyone's experience is different. And a lot of people's experiences can't go unnoticed because it makes up a huge part of their identity and a huge part of who they are and what they do. So to answer that, yes, I will.
Thanks.
For sure, for sure. Yeah, ballet shoes are pale pink. And that's one of the hugest things, is that people don't understand why it's a big deal. I have a follower who bronzers. If you don't know how bronzers work, they are meant to help contour the face, help shape it. And Kosas released a bronzer, and Westman Atelier also released a bronzer. And when they shade swatched the bronzer on a model with darker skin tone, it looked like a highlighter on her. And it's concerning because bronzers are meant to contour and be a deeper shade. And the fact that one particular product is not able to be used for its specific purpose for one group of people, for a huge group of people, is definitely concerning. So, yeah. Any other questions? I definitely am an open book today.
Yeah, Nikki, thank you so much. I have two quick questions. One's more of a beauty question, and the other one's more about like your coalition building. So my first question is, in your analysis of skin tones, you talked about briefly about, and I've noticed there's sometimes like, are you cooler tint, warmer tint, things like that. Did you notice like any brands that were good with that when it came to darker skin tones? Because I think that's something when we're talking about shade matching, that this idea of like cool and warm tints, like, or is that you were like, no, across the board, like if you were lucky to even have just like a neutral tone versus a warmer cool tint? I love makeup and beauty industry, so I'd love to hear if you noticed those kind of trends as well.
That's a great question. Yeah, there are, from the top of my head, I know Liz Beauty was one brand who had a variety of undertones with their shades that were analyzed. So not only were they able to provide a variety of shades, but they were also able to hit on different undertones as well, because it's a huge thing, right? Because something applies to one specific range, if you're a warmer undertone and you put something that's cooler on you, you definitely will tell the difference, right? That blue base and that green base. So that's another thing, again, that would be beneficial for the research, because to understand the frequency of undertones in the world and to know that number and help compare it to what we're finding would better, I guess, add credibility to this research.
Great, thanks. Because that's like one brand that I know that does that, but unfortunately it sounds like only to like white folks is like Color Pop, but it doesn't sound like they are inclusive across. So thank you. And then the other question I had is that you said you are a one-woman machine against these corporations, and corporations are scary and they got money, they have so much money. So, so I'm curious for you, like what kind of coalitions have you been able to build within like the Instagram community and finding other people like, here's a great platform, but I would love to hear about more of like, I know there's other folks doing similar work to you that can help support you in this. And even, and then you can take on these brands like Sephora, like with not just you against the world.
Yeah, for sure. And I definitely agree with birds of the same feather flock together. So that's the same mantra that I reflect on Instagram as well. So the people, when I do my Instagram, of course there's like lifestyle, right? And beauty. And then I have this like the beauty industry shady series, opening up conversations about brands. A lot of my followers, they definitely would read my captions and then comment based on the tone of that caption. And so that's why I try to be as impartial as I can with how I describe these brands, because I want people to draw conclusions on their own. I'm not there to be the end all decision all for all these brands. And so because I've been able to provide the facts and because I've been able to be as transparent as I can with my followers, the type of people that are like-minded with me, they also do the same thing in terms of calling out brands. People have also grown confidence in emailing these brands directly. I have one friend who emailed Kosas and went into like an email battle about their bronzer. And a lot of people are gaining more confidence because at the end of the day, these are people that don't pay your bills. So it doesn't really matter, right? What you're doing is trying to spread more knowledge and education to the industry so that they're able to better the future for other beauty enthusiasts such as you and I. So when I was, I guess, starting to do this type of content, a lot of people were uncomfortable and a lot of people weren't sharing my content. They weren't commenting. They were, some people were asking me, why are you doing this? This isn't the point of the community. We're supposed to be positive. A lot of people were sub-tweeting me, talking to me indirectly. And so I've just found that people who I know are on the same level of thinking as me and same awareness, that's usually who I tend to surround myself with in the community. And so what we'll do is share each other's content. We'll add each other's content to our own content, like, okay, go check out so-and-so for more details on this specific topic. A lot of people have now created Instagram highlights with specific brands. So I'm really happy that a lot more people are being confident. And I even had one instance, and funny enough, you talk about people who are doing the same thing as me, and there definitely are a lot more people that are doing the same thing as me. And it's really nice to see, because it's nice to know that I'm not the only person out there. But there definitely have been times where I felt alone. But again, just being able to surround myself with like-minded individuals and share their content has made the community stronger and better, I feel.
Thanks so much, Nikki.
Yeah, you're welcome.
Hi, Nikki.
Hi, Dr. Cody Riley. How are you?
Good. How are you?
I'm good.
So if we want to support a company that is inclusive, which company should we buy makeup from?
Definitely, there's a few companies that come in mind. In terms of the makeup industry, It's difficult because I could sit here and talk about Fenty Beauty, but Fenty Beauty is not going to be the blueprint for all brands out there, only because there's brands out there that are like Gucci, whose foundation range is actually even more balanced than Fenty Beauty. But then when you think about Gucci and their history, Gucci had that controversy with the blackface sweater. Gucci had a lot of other controversies with lack of diversity. And so it's hard to really state which brands to support. So what I would say, just from a consumer's perspective, is don't just look at their shade range as a determinant on whether or not they're inclusive. It also takes into account their marketing. What type of models do they use? What type of language do they use when they describe or when they talk to their consumers? What's their branding? Like, what is their online identity or their visual identity? Because it does tell a lot about a brand. But to tell you the truth, I don't know a specific brand that's perfect and that deserves all the praise in the world, because there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes, you know?
I'm actually really
sorry.
Sorry. I just wanted a quick follow-up. This is going to be more in the negative. Is there any brand that you're like, oh God, they were like absolutely appalling in terms of their, you know, because again, looking, if I'm, putting that brand on my face, I will like stop. So I would just love the flip side of that question.
Oh, for sure. I'll tell you one popular brand that definitely is on my list of do not support is Ilia Beauty. And the reason why I say that is because, number one, Ilia Beauty handled it incorrectly in the way where people were telling them release more shades. This was before they expanded. People were telling them release more shades, do this and do that. They were like, but people haven't been complaining to us about the lack of shades. Like, we've never heard this. So essentially they're gaslighting their consumers, right? People who are genuinely telling them, look, we need more shades because I can't find my shade. And so finally, after pushback and pushback, they finally released their new line, and it's the title Shades of Us. That was the campaign name, Shades of Us. And when I analyzed it, I showed to my followers the addition or which shades were added on to the original line. And you can see that there were like 5 or 6 new shades added to the 60 to 70, 70 to 80 spectrum. Obviously caters to more lighter skin tones. So this expansion they were talking about really was an expansion at all, not one that the consumers were looking for. So Ilia Beauty is definitely not one that's on my list. Another useful resource, one brand that I don't support is Glossier. And Glossier is one of those really popular brands, but let's think about it. And I say this to a lot of people, if you support that brand, 100% that's you. You do you. Don't let me, judge you on what you spend your money on, because that's your money. But let me tell you this. If you look up on Instagram at Out of the Gloss, I'll put it onto the chat, hopefully. Out of the Gloss, they talk about the things that go on behind the scenes at Glossier. And they have asked numerous times Emily Weiss to remediate or to fire the appropriate personnel that have been causing these bad experiences. Glossier responded but did nothing. They just responded to the post. And so Out of the Gloss was left, without a response or a real solution. So Glossier is just one with, how do I say this? Their marketing as well, the type of models they use, you can also reflect on that, their brand identity as a whole. And all of these experiences of influencers and models and ex-employees of Glossier was enough for me to be like, I don't care what your shade range looks like at this point. The fact that you lack, the decency to approach these situations appropriately is enough for me to make a decision. So I just choose not to give my money to Glossier. But you can definitely choose to give your money to Glossier. You can choose to give your money to any brand you'd like. I'm not here to, patrol the beauty market, but of course, just be considerate. Like, this is where your money's going to. This is what you're funding. And then another last, but certainly not least, they're a skincare brand, but Beauty Bio, and I definitely have to get that out there. Beauty Bio is a huge brand that definitely does not have my support. because there were so many bad experiences that occurred with that brand. And when I had put out that post, Beauty Bio had reported my post so many times that it got taken down. And one of the lawyers contacted me telling me that I was spreading lies. And of course, me being a small creator, right? Okay, I was like, what the heck? Are you serious? So normally what I would do is be like, okay, that's it. Like, I'm not saying anything, yo. Like, I'm crapping my pants right now. Like, I can't do this. But then I was like, people are vulnerable enough, and people, trust me enough to give me their personal experience so that I could put that message out there. So I was like, screw it. I compiled all of the evidence together, and you can see it on my page. I put all of the evidence together. I tagged the brand, I tagged the CEO, the founder, and I posted it a second time. And a lot of people were upset because a lot of people didn't believe what they were seeing, but it was true. It ended up being true. And the reason why I know it's true is because Jamie herself has just admitted it. And the way that she had admitted it was all of the ex-employees that had worked for her and ex-influencers that had worked with her personally confirmed their stories, and they all lined up. So for me to be like, okay, they're lying, they're making stuff up, how can you make something up that lines so well? So Beauty Bio is one brand that I just do not support. And it's okay. Like, I'm sure that these brands don't really care about what, they don't really care. But if you get enough people, and that coalition you were talking about, being able to be with like-minded individuals just makes this easier to do. It makes it easier for you to be more ethically aware about who you're giving your money to. It makes you more aware about which brands to support, because you're able to have, again, a challenging conversation with people who can handle it. And I think that's one of the biggest things that would help push this industry and community forward, is if more people were able to just sit up, talk about it, and come to a conclusion and come to an agreement about what's wrong, what's right, what shouldn't be normal, and what should then be normalized from then on.
I would like to agree with you, what you said. My name is Jennifer Yang. I teach fashion merchandising. So I often talk about beauty industry and the lack of diversity and inclusion, but there are some niche brands that are really doing a good job. So I got to know this company called Mented Cosmetics, which actually was started by these two African-American women who met in Harvard Business School. Like, do you have a hard good, do you have an easy time, being able to find foundation, lipstick, and they weren't able to find them. So that's how they started. And it specifically caters to women who have darker complexion. So it caters to like Hispanic market, African-American market, and they're doing a really good job. So I agree with you that it's not just about like, can you find the right color of our foundation? Because there are some tech companies that make that happen online, like foundation. If you use that kind of technology, you should be able to, theoretically find the right color. However, it's what the company does and what they believe in and how they treat their customers and how they react to the market's needs. I think that's the most important thing, because just like sustainability, like we believe in what the company believes in, and if it's aligned, then we're going to buy products from them. If they don't, then forget it.
Right.
So yeah, I agree with you.
Thank you. Yeah, 100%. And I think too, with a lot of people don't understand is this is definitely a conversation that's not just exclusive to BIPOC. It's definitely a conversation that's open to anyone, and anyone should be able to put their 2 cents in it. Because again, there's so many perspectives out there that you can't really have, or at least I can't with a platform with mine. I can't just say, okay, this brand is not inclusive, this brand is inclusive, this brand's racist, this brand's not racist. There's a lot of research that goes into it, but at the end of the day, we still have that responsibility to make a decision that would better the community and society as a whole. It doesn't matter if it's beauty related or not.
I actually, thanks Jennifer for sharing your insights. It's very helpful. And now I know, because I've heard of Mented, I've seen Mented, I don't use it, but now I know I'm going to really look into it and recommend it as well.
They're
and one
also
of,
very much involved in the community
I
or,
cannot wait to be a
yeah.
part of it. Because honestly, what I'm taking from this for me is to ensure that as I'm using products, as I'm recommending products in the future, what I'm taking is to make sure that I look into their values, what they respect, what do they do, how, what's their intention, their mission, and use those type of things to also drive the narrative and drive the conversation. And in the classes I do, I literally recommend products. Like I give a list of products for people. And so now I'm going to really go in, look at more of these products. There's so many smaller brands out there, kind of like you're saying, Mented, skincare and makeup brands out there that have come out and have so much to offer that I know that in the next couple of years will be known and renowned because they've come out with a purpose. They came out with an intention and with a vision. And so their names might not be out there right now, but there's so many of them. Like there's a new company called Bolden, which caters to skincare. I know that there are some, Venus Williams has a new sunscreen that really caters to athletes and different skin tones. So I'm going to be looking at brands that have a vision and a mission and care genuinely about the customer. So that's what I'm taking, Nikki. But Jennifer, ooh, I loved what you said. Really awesome.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But yeah, just to take away at the end of the day, it really does matter who you give your money to because you do fund certain behaviors and you do fund these people's livelihood. And for me anyway, I am mindful about which brands and which products that I give my money to, mostly because you got to practice what you preach and you got to put your money where your mouth is. So if you're going to continue having this conversation, continue trying to spread awareness to these people, you should also reflect those same values yourself. And so identifying the values and ethics of all of these brands is a huge part of consumers' purchasing decisions because it's people's values that reflect what they're into and their beliefs and what they choose to invest their money and time into. And so you can tell a lot about a brand based on what they do and their behavior and their products. So being mindful of the entire thing as it is, just looking at the big picture and just telling yourself that this is a conversation that needs to be had. Positive, negative, if it's the truth, it has to be said. It doesn't matter what goes on.
Thank you, Nikki. There was one more question I wanted to make sure we got to before we wrapped up, and that was from Van. And she said, were you able to read it in the chat? Thanks so much for this presentation, Nikki. Your work is truly inspirational. And when I think of these companies, I'm sure they use a lot of market research to find trends, identify their consumers to make these shades and products. Do you think there are also a lot of biases that go into these market research reports that are widely published and used by these companies to justify their shades and products? And have you ever thought with partnering with these research firms to publish and get your work out there?
That's a great question, Van. To answer the first one, do I think there's a lot of biases that go into these market research reports? I would hope not. I mean, let me just say this. Let me preface with this. When it comes to my shade analysis, I merely just do the analyzing of the shades. So when I look into the market research of these brands and things and behind the scenes, that's definitely something that would be beneficial, but something I have not done. So do I think that there are biases that go into these market research reports? I hope not, considering that they do determine a lot of things in the industry. And have I ever thought about partnering with these research firms? Yes, for sure. I would love to partner with these research firms. And the only reason why I haven't is, mind you, I didn't think Shady Series was going to get traction the way that it did. I didn't think people were going to be interested in it. because of how challenging it is to explain to people the disparity that's going on within the beauty industry. So to bring it big time, yes, I would think about partnering with these research firms. Have I? No, not yet. Big things to come, but yes.
Big things coming and on the horizon. Thank you all for coming, and thank you, Nikki, for sharing. We're so proud of you. We're so inspired. You've given us a lot to think about and reflect upon in our consciousness as consumers, and as people sharing space and walking the world. So thank you for sharing that holy gospel with us.
Thank you, guys. Thank you for having me on. I talk a lot, so I hope it was,
That's what we needed.
Man, I just get uncomfortable with awkward silences. But thank you so much for coming. And if you have a foundation you want me to analyze or something to look into, definitely feel free to email me or message me on Instagram. I try to be as active as I can, but I hope to see you guys in the Instagram space as well. Thank you. And also thank you to my professors that had come. That's very sweet of you guys. Man.
We're so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you so much. I was definitely anxious about it, and I'm definitely still shy to talk about it because that's something that I'm not used to, but something I'm working on.
So articulate, so polished, you would never know.
Oh, goodness, don't. All right. Well, thank you so much.